At the farthest edge of our world lies a silence so complete, it seems untouched by time. Antarctica, endless, white and forbidden, has long been a place of questions without answers. Beyond its towering ice walls stretch frozen plains few have seen, where compasses fail, satellites blur, and radio signals vanish into the cold. For over a century, nations have built treaties to protect it, expeditions have vanished trying to cross it, and instruments have recorded sounds that should not exist beneath the ice. Some say it hides only stone and water. Others believe it guards something far older, something that was never meant to be found. Tonight we follow the evidence buried beneath the frost, through sealed archives, lost expeditions, and the whispers of a living continent. This is What is Guarding the Ice Wall, Antarctica's greatest secret, the frozen gate. At the bottom of the world lies a silence that seems untouched by time. Antarctica is not merely a continent of ice. It is a world of concealment, a frozen gate that has resisted human understanding since the first explorers glimpsed its blinding horizon. The modern maps call it a polar desert, but its sheer scale, over 14 million square kilometers, hides secrets larger than any desert or mountain range on Earth. Beneath its endless white lies a terrain of valleys, lakes, and mountains, buried under kilometers of ice, unseen since before human civilization began. The first real encounter with this hidden continent came in January 1820. Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, a Russian naval officer, recorded seeing what he described as an ice field of great extent. His log noted nothing of life, no movement, only a wall of white rising from the sea. Later, when James Clark Ross arrived in 1841, he encountered the same phenomenon. Cliffs of solid ice, some over 50 meters high, stretching for hundreds of miles. He called them the Great Ice Barrier. The name has changed, but the impression has not. It still stands as if something is being kept apart or protected. When satellite imagery became available in the 1970 seconds, scientists found that beneath this ice wall lay entire mountain ranges, such as the Gamburtsev Mountains, peaks as tall as the Alps, hidden under 2,700 meters of frozen water. Seismic readings revealed subglacial lakes, including Lake Vostok, sealed off from the surface for over 15 million years. Inside that isolation, microbial life was found, organisms adapted to survive total darkness and pressure that would crush most known species. The isolation was complete. Some researchers speculated that Lake Vostok might mirror the conditions of moons like Europa or Enceladus, where oceans lie beneath ice crusts, waiting in silence. Yet, the ice wall remains a symbol not only of nature's defense, but also of secrecy. After World War II, in 1946, the United States launched Operation High Jump, led by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd. It was the largest Antarctic expedition in history, over 4,000 men, 13 ships, and multiple aircraft. The mission's official aim was to establish a research base, but its scale seemed excessive for simple exploration. Within months, the operation was abruptly cut short. Reports from Chilean newspapers at the time quoted Byrd saying that the next war would be fought in a region near the poles. That sentence, spoken without elaboration, has echoed ever since. In the years that followed, the ice wall became the edge of human curiosity. Planes flying near it have described magnetic anomalies, compasses spinning without direction. Scientists have reported radar signals bouncing off what appeared to be metallic structures deep beneath the ice. One team from the British Antarctic Survey in 2006 detected geometric reflections beneath Princess Elizabeth Land, regular shapes inconsistent with natural formations. Their data was quietly archived. Public discussion faded. In 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was signed by 12 nations, later joined by dozens more. It declared the continent a place for peaceful research. forbidding all military activity and suspending territorial claims. But it also sealed the region from independent exploration. No private expeditions may pass beyond certain latitudes without authorization. Flights that deviate from approved routes are redirected or turned back. Satellites, too, have been restricted from imaging specific coordinates. The reasons are described as environmental protection or safety. But to many, it feels like the ice wall itself is being guarded not by nature, but by policy. Within this isolation, the number of recorded human installations remains surprisingly low. Most are scientific outposts clustered along the coast. The interior, where the ice wall stands tallest, is nearly empty. The American Amundsen Scott Station at the South Pole, the Russian Vostok Station, and the Concordia Station run by France and Italy are among the few that persist year-round. Temperatures there reach -80 degrees Celsius. At such extremes, metal becomes brittle, fuel gels, and exposed skin freezes within seconds. It is a place that naturally rejects intrusion. Still, whispers of hidden presences have endured. In 2018, satellite imagery captured a circular depression in the ice near the Shackleton Range, measuring roughly 400 meters across. Analysts suggested it could be the entrance to a subglacial cave formed by geothermal heat. Others, more speculative, called it an artificial structure. A decade earlier, in 2008, seismic anomalies were recorded by a Norwegian team in Queen Maud Land, repeating vibrations with a mechanical rhythm, not geological. Their report concluded, source undetermined, possibly equipment malfunction. The data was filed and forgotten. Those who have worked on the continent describe a feeling of being watched, even in emptiness. Radio operators at McMurdo Station speak of unidentified signals that appear and vanish without trace bursts of code-like noise with no known source. In 2009, the US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency briefly funded a project known as Ice Pulse, designed to map electromagnetic fluctuations across the polar region. The results were never released. Some of the earliest explorers had already sensed that the continent held more than cold. Ernest Shackleton, during his 1915 expedition aboard the Endurance, wrote in his diary of hearing, "A hollow resonance beneath the ice, as though struck from below." The entry was never explained. His crew later dismissed it as the sound of pressure ridges shifting. But Shackleton's description matched accounts written decades later by Soviet scientists at Novolazarevskaya Station, who reported low-frequency tones traveling through the ice at intervals too regular to be random. In this way, the ice wall continues to divide two worlds, one known, one hidden. The surface is mapped, its heights measured, yet beneath it, the Earth's oldest secrets remain sealed. Whether they belong to geology, ancient climate, or something older still, no one can say. The guards of the ice may not wear uniforms or carry weapons. They may be the protocols, the treaties, the distances, and the silence itself. The wall stands not only against explorers, but against time, preserving what the planet chose to bury. There are those who believe that beyond the ice lies an older land one that predates the recorded map of civilization. They point to ancient charts, like the Piri Reis map of 1513, which appears to show Antarctica free of ice, drawn centuries before it was officially discovered. The lines of latitude, the shape of the coast, the rivers leading inland, all strangely accurate. Charles Hapgood, in his 1966 study Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, argued that the source of these charts was a civilization with advanced surveying skills, existing long before known history. The map's inclusion of an ice-free Antarctic coast suggests a time when the continent was warm, possibly inhabited. If that civilization left remnants, they would now lie deep beneath the ice sheet, guarded by the barrier that nature and perhaps something else has maintained. The world above can only observe from afar, its instruments dulled by frost and distance. The Great Ice Wall remains as it was described 2 centuries ago, vast, unbroken, and indifferent. Behind it, there is either nothing or everything we are not yet meant to see. The sealed lakes. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice lies a labyrinth of water that has never seen sunlight. These are the sealed lakes, hidden reservoirs, trapped for millions of years under layers of frozen time. They stretch beneath the continent's surface like forgotten seas, their existence unknown until the 20th century, when sound waves and radar first pierced the ice. Each one is a separate world, enclosed beneath immense pressure, where life may have followed its own isolated path. The most mysterious of these is Lake Vostok. It sits beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, close to the Russian Vostok station, discovered in 1959. The lake is roughly 250 kilometers long and 50 kilometers wide, comparable in size to Lake Ontario, but completely invisible from the surface. In 1996, British and Russian researchers confirmed its presence using radar altimetry. The data revealed not just liquid water, but also ridges, islands, and currents beneath the ice. It was a discovery that altered how scientists saw Antarctica not as dead, but as sealed. For millions of years, the lake has remained isolated from the atmosphere, shielded from contamination by the ice cap above it. Pressure and geothermal heat keep the water from freezing. The environment there has no sunlight, no exchange of air, and no contact with the outer world. Yet, when samples were drawn from the ice above the lake in 2013, DNA traces were found belonging to bacteria and microbial life, unlike anything known elsewhere on Earth. Some scientists called it contamination from the drilling equipment. Others noted that the structures of the cells did not match any known modern species. A study by Sergei Bulat of the St. Petersburg Nuclear Physics Institute reported genetic sequences with no clear evolutionary relatives. This may represent life adapted to extreme isolation, he wrote. The samples were small, but their implications were large. They hinted that life might exist anywhere liquid water endures beneath Mars, or inside the frozen oceans of Europa. NASA quietly observed the project, sending advisory teams to monitor the process. In interviews, engineers from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory later admitted that techniques developed at Vostok were used in designing drills for the Europa Clipper mission. But Lake Vostok is not alone. More than 400 subglacial lakes are now known to exist beneath Antarctica's ice sheet. Lake Whillans, for instance, lies beneath 800 meters of ice and was accessed by a US team in 2013 using a sterile hot water drill. Unlike Vostok, its waters contained active microorganisms living, feeding, and reproducing in darkness. The discovery confirmed that entire ecosystems exist beneath the Antarctic crust. The life there survives on chemical reactions between rock, water, and trapped gases like methane and sulfur, independent from sunlight. In 2015, the same team detected traces of carbon dioxide fluctuations, suggesting that gases move through fissures connecting several lakes, like veins within the ice. If these systems are connected, the Antarctic subglacial network could span thousands of kilometers. Some models suggest that water from the higher interior lakes flows toward the coast, forming under-ice rivers that eventually drain into the Southern Ocean. Radar surveys from NASA's Operation Icebridge have traced one such path from Lake Sovetskaya to the Slesser Glacier. The movement is slow, measured in centimeters per day, but constant. It means the ice is alive in its own way, breathing through hidden channels, circulating ancient water through unseen caverns. The most restricted of these sites, however, remains Lake Vostok. After the first successful drilling, all subsequent attempts were closely monitored by international agencies. Concerns about biological contamination led to strict limits on further penetration. Officially, this was to protect a pristine environment. Unofficially, the secrecy around the samples has raised questions. Only a few grams of the lake's water were ever brought to the surface, and the majority of test results were sealed in classified archives under joint Russian-French agreements. In 2015, a follow-up expedition was approved but delayed indefinitely. No public explanation was provided. Meanwhile, satellite infrared scans in 2018 showed unexpected thermal signatures near the same region, localized heat sources far stronger than could be produced by simple geothermal activity. The readings suggested areas where the ice was melting from below, possibly due to volcanic vents, or perhaps to something generating sustained energy in confined space. The coordinates matched the perimeter of Lake Vostok. When journalists from several European outlets requested access to flight logs for overflights of the area, the data was unavailable. All flights had been rerouted for safety reasons. Other sealed lakes, such as Lake Ellsworth in West Antarctica, have also revealed anomalies. British teams drilling in 2012 reported equipment failures that occurred repeatedly at a precise depth 3,060 meters before contact with liquid water. Magnetic interference was blamed, though sensors had been tested in similar conditions elsewhere. The drilling ceased after sudden pressure drops inside the borehole. Later, acoustic devices recorded faint echoing patterns from below, repeating at regular intervals, as if from movement. The researchers avoided speculation, stating only that the readings remain under analysis. Antarctica's isolation has made it a natural laboratory for questions humanity has barely begun to answer. What forms can life take when cut off from sunlight for millions of years? How long can memory endure inside water that has not touched air since before the Ice Age? And perhaps most quietly, what else might inhabit these depths, beyond the reach of modern light? In the 1,990 seconds declassified U.S. Navy documents mentioned unidentified sonar contacts beneath the Ross Ice Shelf. The report noted that the echoes were biologically inconsistent, moving at speeds faster than known marine life. No conclusion followed. Later, scientists proposed that collapsing ice shelves might create false sonar returns. The explanation was plausible, but the coordinates aligned with a subglacial trench connected to several sealed lakes. Today, research continues under layers of regulation and silence. Only a handful of scientists are granted permits each year to collect samples from the Antarctic interior. Their findings pass through review panels that seldom release data immediately. A recurring phrase in many published papers reads simply, "Further results pending analysis." The world waits, as it has always waited, at the edge of the ice. Beneath kilometers of frozen rock and ancient air, the lakes remain unseen. Their waters, warm and dark, could contain echoes of a world that predated all human memory, or a reflection of life's persistence in forms we can barely imagine. They are sealed not only by ice, but by caution, time, and the quiet understanding that some doors are opened slowly, if at all. The hidden valleys. Beneath the miles of Antarctic ice, there is another continent, a buried world of mountains, canyons, and valleys that remain almost invisible to the human eye. These are not small features. They are vast, ancient formations, some deeper than the Grand Canyon, carved long before the first ice began to fall. Radar mapping has revealed their outlines: the Gamburtsev Range, the Recovery Basin, the Aurora Subglacial Valley, and the Bird Basin, each an echo of an Earth we no longer recognize. The Gamburtsev Mountains lie near the center of East Antarctica. They stretch for 1,200 kilometers, their peaks rising as high as 3,400 meters, yet they are buried under more than 2 kilometers of ice. No one has ever seen them directly. When scientists from the International Polar Year Project mapped them in 2009, they were stunned by what they found. The peaks were sharp, not eroded, suggesting they were protected beneath the ice for at least 30 million years. Beneath these frozen ridges, seismic scans revealed deep valleys and what appeared to be ancient river systems frozen mid-flow. Some called it the heart of the hidden continent. These valleys are more than geological curiosities. They act as channels for ice flow, guiding how glaciers move toward the coast. Yet some seem to drain in directions that make no sense, rivers running upward through the rock. This anomaly led scientists to propose the existence of geothermal sources, or heat vents, deep below. The Aurora subglacial basin, mapped by the Australian Antarctic Division in 2014, contains one of the lowest points on Earth's surface, not covered by ocean more than 3 kilometers below sea level. The depression is surrounded by magnetic disturbances, strong enough to interfere with aircraft instruments. The region is rarely visited. Farther west lies the McMurdo Dry Valleys, a rare place in Antarctica, where the ice simply does not exist. Stretching over 4,800 square kilometers, they are among the driest places on the planet, with humidity lower than that of the Atacama Desert. No snow falls here. The air is so cold and moistureless that ice sublimates directly into vapor. The landscape looks more like Mars than Earth: jagged rocks, salt deposits, and the remains of ancient lakes that evaporated thousands of years ago. NASA has tested its Mars rovers here for decades, calling the valleys a natural simulation of alien worlds. Despite the dryness, there is life. Microbes have been found living inside rocks, in microscopic veins of salt water that never freeze. In 2016, the University of Colorado team discovered that brine beneath the Taylor Glacier still flowed its red iron-stained outlet, known as Blood Falls. The liquid seeps through cracks, carrying with it bacteria that have survived for more than 1 million years without sunlight or oxygen. When the brine hits the air, it oxidizes, turning blood red against the white ice. It is one of the most haunting sights on the continent. The dry valleys are also home to magnetic anomalies. In 1977, a U.S. Geological Survey recorded an unusual signal near the Wright Valley, an area of consistent electromagnetic interference that has never been fully explained. Instruments picked up faint rhythmic pulses at intervals of 11 minutes. The source was believed to be geological, though no corresponding magnetic deposit was found beneath the surface. When the readings were repeated in 1993, the same pattern returned, unchanged. The data remains archived under unknown natural variation. Under the ice sheet, the valleys continue in darkness. Seismic surveys show entire basins filled not with solid rock, but loose sediment, suggesting they once held rivers or even shallow seas. The Recovery Subglacial Basin, discovered in 2013, extends over 1,000 kilometers and drains into the Filchner ice shelf. Scientists believe it may connect several buried lakes and valleys, forming an ancient drainage system that predates the current ice cap. Some of the sediment samples drilled from this region contained fragments of fossilized diatoms, microscopic algae that typically live in warm, shallow water. Their presence implies that, at some point in Earth's distant past, Antarctica may have been a temperate landscape covered with vegetation and open rivers. The question of when it froze remains debated. Some studies suggest the first major glaciation began around 34 million years ago, when atmospheric carbon dioxide dropped sharply. But ice cores from Dome Sea hint at cycles of melting and refreezing, meaning parts of the continent may have thawed multiple times. If that is true, then beneath the current ice lies a layered record of ancient climates and perhaps traces of species that adapted to them. A joint British and Chinese survey in 2019 used radar tomography to explore a section near Princess Elizabeth Land. The images revealed angular structures resembling terraces and ridges, not random geological patterns, but symmetrical alignments several kilometers wide. The official explanation referred to ice deformation artifacts. Yet the spacing appeared uniform, as if cut or eroded by deliberate patterning. The data was filed for further analysis, but no follow-up publication has appeared. Even stranger are the heat signatures detected under the ice. NASA's ICET-2 mission observed thermal anomalies that seemed to move slowly beneath the surface, traveling along valley lines at speeds too steady for natural convection. One hypothesis is that volcanic activity under the West Antarctic Rift System produces pulses of rising heat. Another, less discussed, is that certain regions maintain consistent warmth without geological cause, perhaps due to chemical reactions or trapped magnetic fields. To the few who have seen these readings firsthand, Antarctica's buried valleys resemble a living system, vast arteries of frozen stone, channeling water, heat, and time itself beneath the ice. It is a world almost separate from ours, one that remembers a green earth lost to history. The dry winds of McMurdo and the buried rivers of Aurora may simply be remnants of that forgotten age, preserved like organs in a body of ice. The hidden valleys remind humanity how little of the planet it truly knows. While satellites chart the stars above, the ground beneath our feet still keeps its oldest chapters buried, sealed beneath layers of silence and frost. And as radar waves echo back from depths no one can reach, they sketch only fragments of what waits below a continent within a continent, frozen between two worlds, quietly enduring the long memory of the Earth. Operation High Jump. In the austral summer of 1946, the stillness of Antarctica was broken by the arrival of one of the largest military expeditions in peacetime history. It was called Operation High Jump. Officially, it was organized by the United States Navy under the command of Rear Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd. Its stated purpose was to establish the Antarctic research base known as Little America 4, train personnel for cold weather operations, and test equipment in extreme conditions. Yet, the scale of the operation told another story. 13 ships, 23 aircraft, and more than 4,000 men were deployed to one of the most inhospitable regions on Earth. No other research expedition before or since has matched its size. The fleet departed from Norfolk, Virginia, in December 1946. It was led by the flagship USS Mount Olympus and included an aircraft carrier, destroyers, tankers, seaplane tenders, and submarines. The journey south took weeks, the vessels moving through heavy seas toward the Ross Sea, guided by icebreakers. On board were scientists, photographers, naval aviators, engineers, and armed personnel. Byrd, already a celebrated polar explorer, had commanded earlier Antarctic expeditions in the 1,922nd and 1,930nd. But this time his mission had the full backing of the US military and several intelligence agencies. Once in the region, the operation divided into 3 groups: the Eastern, Western, and Central Task Forces. Each was assigned to conduct aerial mapping and reconnaissance over the vast ice sheet. The planes, equipped with cameras and magnetic instruments, flew systematic grid patterns to record the terrain. In just a few months, they captured more than 70,000 aerial photographs, covering an estimated 1.5 million square kilometers. But while the mapping continued, reports from crew members began to describe conditions that did not match expectations. Radio operators logged strange atmospheric interference that disrupted communication between the aircraft and ships. Compass readings fluctuated wildly, even within short distances. Some of these accounts later appeared in personal journals. Lieutenant Commander David E. Bunger, piloting a Martin PBM Mariner, described flying over what appeared to be a large ice-free area, dark greenish water surrounded by ice cliffs. The air temperature there was much warmer than outside. He recorded that the instruments briefly malfunctioned as the plane circled the region. Samples of the water were collected, and it was found to be fresh, not salt. The area was later marked on flight logs as Bunga's Oasis. Officially, it was identified as a melt zone caused by geothermal activity. But the anomaly has continued to puzzle researchers. Operation High Jump was expected to last 6 to 8 months. Instead, it ended abruptly after less than half that time. In March 1947, Admiral Byrd ordered the immediate withdrawal of the fleet. The reasons given were adverse weather and mechanical difficulties. Yet, the weather reports from that period were relatively stable, and many of the ships had supplies remaining. When Byrd returned to Chile, he gave an interview to El Mercurio, a Santiago newspaper. In it, he made a cryptic statement. The United States must take defensive actions against the possibility of enemy planes coming from the polar regions. The next war could come from the poles. His words were unusual. The Second World War had ended only 2 years earlier, and the Cold War had just begun. There was no known enemy in Antarctica. Some historians interpret Byrd's comment as a warning about long-range Soviet bombers crossing the poles. Others suggest he had seen something unexpected, something that could travel faster or behave unlike any known aircraft of that era. Rumours surrounding Operation High Jump have grown in the decades since. Some claim the expedition encountered strange craft near the ice wall, described as luminous disks or metallic spheres moving at impossible speeds. These accounts first appeared in post-war South American newspapers and were later repeated in alternative history circles. No official documents confirm them, yet certain details of the mission remain classified even today. The Navy's after-action report lists missing aircraft and personnel losses attributed to accidents during severe weather. 3 PBM Mariners were destroyed during the operation, one of them exploding in mid-air during a reconnaissance flight. The cause was never fully established. In later years, several veterans of the expedition spoke cautiously about what they experienced. Flight engineer Harry Gerson recalled light phenomena over the horizon that moved independently of weather patterns. Others described sudden drops in temperature and dense fog that appeared without warning, disrupting their navigation equipment. The official stance of the U.S. Navy remained consistent. The expedition was purely scientific, and its early termination was due to logistical strain. But the secrecy that followed, combined with Byrd's ambiguous statements, fueled decades of speculation. One of the enduring theories proposes that Operation High Jump discovered an entrance to vast subglacial caverns, possibly remnants of an older civilization or military installations built during the war. Some suggest that German submarines, fleeing at the end of 1945, may have reached the southern ice shelf. The records of U-530 and U-977, 2 submarines that surrendered months after Germany's defeat, list unusual routes that end near the South Atlantic. When questioned, their commanders claimed to have been conducting weather research. Still, the belief persisted that hidden bases existed beneath the Antarctic ice stories, reinforced by scattered reports of unmarked ships spotted near the region in the late 1940s. In 1948, the U.S. Navy initiated Operation Windmill, officially to complete the aerial photography interrupted by High Jump. However, this follow-up was far smaller, and its findings were never widely released. Admiral Byrd himself retired shortly after and remained largely silent about his experiences until his death in 1957. Some of his private diaries, published decades later, included passages describing lush valleys beyond the ice, though their authenticity is disputed. Whether genuine or fabricated, they echo the consistent mystery that surrounds his final Antarctic journey. Today, the records of Operation High Jump remain one of the most enigmatic episodes in modern exploration. The raw data, photographs, and mission logs are stored across several archives, some still redacted. The official explanation training, mapping, logistics sits quietly beside the unanswered questions. Why did such an immense force travel to the world's most desolate frontier, only to return in silence? What did Byrd mean when he spoke of threats from the poles? And why does so much of the documentation remain hidden nearly 80 years later? The frozen continent keeps its answers sealed beneath ice and time. The ships came and went, leaving behind only fragments of film, coded radio transcripts, and the faint echoes of propellers swallowed by endless wind. Operation High Jump remains suspended in history, an event that began as exploration, ended as withdrawal, and left behind the quiet suspicion that something at the bottom of the world was never meant to be found. The treaty that locked the continent. In the quiet year of 1959, while much of the world focused on the growing tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, a different kind of agreement was being drafted, one that would shape the most remote region on Earth. It was called the Antarctic Treaty. Signed in Washington, D.C. on December 1st, it marked the first time in history that multiple global powers agreed to share a vast portion of the planet, not for conquest, but for silence. 12 nations signed it initially: the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, France, Japan, Norway, Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, Chile, South Africa, and Belgium. The agreement was brief, only 14 articles long, yet its implications would freeze the continent more thoroughly than the ice itself. The treaty declared that Antarctica shall be used for peaceful purposes only. It prohibited any military activity, no bases, no weapons tests, no fortifications. It suspended all existing territorial claims, effectively erasing national boundaries below the 60th parallel south. It also forbade nuclear explosions and the disposal of radioactive waste. On the surface, it appeared to be a landmark in international cooperation, but buried within the calm legal language were clauses that quietly limited who could go, where they could travel, and what could be studied. Article 7 allowed inspection by designated observers, giving certain nations unrestricted access to others' research stations, but only under mutual consent. Article 9 established that no change to the treaty could occur without unanimous approval. This meant that once it was signed, the continent would remain sealed under the control of its original members, immune to outside interference. The treaty effectively froze ownership and access, as it stood in 1959, at the dawn of the Cold War. Over the years, more countries joined, but the core authority remained with the original signatories. Today, more than 50 nations are parties to the agreement, yet only 29 hold consultative status, meaning they can make decisions. The rest can observe, but not vote. This structure quietly preserved a hierarchy: those who discovered, and those who would always remain outside the door. Publicly, the treaty is often cited as a triumph of diplomacy. It stands as a model for cooperation in space law and other global commons. But the question persists. Why would the world's superpowers, in the middle of a global arms race, agree to demilitarize a landmass twice the size of Australia? What value could be hidden under all that ice, important enough to demand silence? In the decades following the treaty, scientific research stations were built but under strict control. Access required government approval and coordination through the Antarctic Treaty System. No private expeditions could legally establish bases or conduct drilling without oversight. Satellite imaging above certain latitudes was restricted for environmental protection. Even today, commercial satellites are not permitted to freely map specific coordinates, particularly those near certain mountain ranges and subglacial regions. In 1991, a new protocol, the Madrid Protocol, was added to the treaty. It designated Antarctica as a natural reserve devoted to peace and science. It banned all mining and extraction of minerals indefinitely, The justification was environmental preservation. Yet some scientists noted the extraordinary coincidence that Antarctica holds some of the world's largest deposits of coal, oil, and precious metals beneath its ice sheet. Geophysical surveys conducted during the 1,950 seconds and 1,960 seconds had already detected these resources. Still, the ban was absolute. Even exploratory drilling was forbidden. The continent was to remain untouched. The control of the Antarctic region extends beyond its land. Airspace over the continent is tightly regulated. Only approved flight paths are allowed, and commercial airlines are prohibited from crossing the pole except under specific circumstances. Drones and private aircraft are banned from most research zones. This strict enforcement is unusual compared to other international areas, such as open oceans or outer space, where freedom of navigation is standard. In Antarctica, movement is watched and logged. The enforcement is subtle but complete. Those who have attempted unauthorized travel, such as private explorers or independent researchers, often find their expeditions blocked by logistical impossibility. Fuel is unavailable, flight clearances are denied, and supply routes close unexpectedly. In 2016, a team of scientists from New Zealand reported being turned back from a region near Marie Byrd Land after equipment malfunctions and a sudden halt in weather clearance. Official reports listed the reason as air instability, though satellite data from that period showed no major storms. The area they were attempting to reach contained radar anomalies recorded since 1997. The secrecy surrounding certain parts of the continent has led to speculation about what the treaty truly protects. While most of Antarctica's coastline is well mapped, large portions of the interior remain poorly documented. Satellite data often shows digital distortions or blank patches areas left uncatalogued. The rationale given is the limitation of resolution due to ice reflection. But similar conditions exist in Greenland, and yet the imagery there is complete. In 2018, researchers from the University of Edinburgh used ice-penetrating radar to map parts of the transantarctic mountains. Their scans revealed a pattern of cavities beneath the ice, some large enough to fit entire cities. The study's authors described them as air gaps created by geothermal processes, though the shape of the voids was geometrically unusual, rectangular and evenly spaced. When asked whether further exploration would be permitted, the response was short, "Not at this time." The Antarctic Treaty remains one of the longest-lasting international agreements ever signed. It has survived political upheavals, wars, and global realignments. Every attempt to amend it has failed. In 2048, the Environmental Protocol will come up for potential review, but any change will require unanimous consent, something nearly impossible to achieve. Until then, the continent remains locked, its resources untapped, its secrets preserved under law. Those who have studied the treaty closely note that it is not only a scientific document, it is a containment structure. It divides the world between what can be known and what must remain untouched. Behind its calm language lies a kind of quiet guardianship, protecting the ice or protecting what the ice conceals. The paper barrier that began in 1959 has outlasted nearly every political alliance of the modern era. It endures because it serves a purpose no one openly defines. Antarctica is at once the most peaceful and the most restricted place on Earth. A vast, white silence, guarded not by armies, but by signatures and the slow, unbroken frost of secrecy. The forbidden coordinates. There are places in Antarctica that cannot be seen, not because they are too distant or too cold, but because they have been quietly removed from sight. When satellite maps of the continent are assembled, there are strips of distortion, blank patches, and regions where the data simply ends. In some cases, the image tiles do not align, as though two separate maps were merged imperfectly. The explanations are often technical satellite glare, poor resolution, ice reflection, but the same distortions appear again and again in the same coordinates across multiple mapping systems and decades of imaging. One of the most well-known of these anomalies lies near 75 degrees south, 0 degrees east, a region at the edge of Queen Maud Land. On public satellite views, a portion of the terrain appears blurred, as though a grey haze has been laid across the ice. Early maps from the 1970 seconds list this area as part of the Waldat Massif. Yet high-resolution scans made in 1997 by NASA's MODIS satellite showed geometric shadows that did not correspond to any known topography. Shortly after, the image file was updated, and the anomalies vanished. When the European Space Agency launched its Sentinel-1 radar satellite in 2014, the same coordinates again returned unreadable data, described officially as sensor interference. Another blank zone exists near 66 degrees south, 99 degrees east, close to the coast of Wilkes Land. In 2006, scientists examining gravitational anomalies noticed a circular depression more than 240 kilometers wide, buried under 800 meters of ice. The data suggested an immense mass beneath the surface, possibly a metallic structure or the remnant of a large impact crater. The official conclusion labeled it the Wilkes Land crater, speculated to have been created by an asteroid 250 million years ago linked to the Permian extinction, yet no direct sampling has ever been allowed. Every proposed drilling mission since has been denied environmental clearance. Pilots flying near these coordinates have reported equipment malfunctions. Compasses begin to rotate slowly, GPS systems lose lock, and radios fall into static. In 2012, a Brazilian research aircraft flying from the Comandante Ferraz station recorded unexplained magnetic flux variations when passing over 70 degrees south, 10 degrees east. The onboard instruments captured fluctuations consistent with high-intensity electromagnetic fields. The pilots returned safely, but the recorded data was never released publicly. The phenomenon is not confined to the sky. In 1989, a team from the British Antarctic Survey, conducting ice-penetrating radar near the Pensacola Mountains, encountered repeating signal reflections, mirror-like surfaces at a depth of 3,000 meters. The reflections formed perfect geometric angles, unlike any known glacial formations. When the team attempted to repeat the readings the following season, their equipment failed at the same coordinates. Later maintenance checks found no faults. The area was added to a restricted zone list for environmental protection. As more satellites were launched in the 21st century, these forbidden coordinates remained uncorrected. Even commercial services that offer high-resolution imagery, such as Google Earth or Bing Maps, contain visible seams across Antarctic territory. In 2018, independent researchers stitched together declassified NASA scans from the Terra and Aqua satellites and noticed entire regions missing, with files labeled No Data. When compared with earlier Soviet satellite maps, the missing zones aligned with areas once surveyed by Operation Highjump and later restricted under the Antarctic Treaty. The most persistent distortion lies at 82 degrees south, 65 degrees east, deep within the Princess Elizabeth Land sector. The region is occasionally cited in polar research logs as Area 2810. It is rarely discussed publicly, but a handful of technical documents from the early 2000s reference it indirectly. One, published by the U.S. Geological Survey in 2003, noted unusual radar reflectivity consistent with subglacial voids of high salinity. A subsequent line was redacted. In 2015, a thermal scan from NASA's Earth Observing System registered heat signatures emanating from the same coordinates pockets of warmth beneath the ice that did not match geothermal patterns. Within weeks, the imagery was replaced with a lower resolution version, the data gap labeled processing error. Some have attempted to reach these places. In 2016, a small private expedition funded by European researchers planned to approach the Queen Maud Land anomaly by snowcat convoy from the Troll Station. Their permits were revoked days before departure due to regional instability. The team later reported receiving communications from their logistical partners advising that the route had been reclassified for safety. No further details were given. The few scientists allowed to study these restricted regions are bound by non-disclosure agreements under their national programs. When questioned, most defer to vague phrases such as environmental conservation zones or sensitive terrain. Yet the pattern of omission, the same coordinates obscured, the same explanations repeated, suggests that Antarctica is mapped not as one continuous land, but as a patchwork of permitted knowledge. Even within the broader research community, data gaps are quietly accepted. When high-frequency radar instruments aboard the IceSat 2 mission encountered repeated signal interference near the Shackleton ice shelf, the event logs were marked with the code QX14, a designation meaning inconclusive. No further analysis was published. The silence around such entries is rarely challenged. Antarctica has become, by design, a continent of selective vision. Those who examine the old archives find hints of what may lie behind these coordinates. Soviet polar maps from the 1950 seconds, drawn before the modern treaties took effect, depict inland valleys and circular depressions where modern maps show only blank whiteness. Handwritten notations in Cyrillic mark certain zones as Zaprytnaya Oblast, forbidden area. Whether these were based on early seismic readings or simple caution is unknown. In the age of global surveillance, Antarctica remains the last place on Earth, with shadows large enough to hide within. The frozen continent has no cities, no highways, no permanent inhabitants, yet its imagery is more carefully censored than most military zones. Between the blurred coordinates and the quiet refusals, a pattern emerges, a geometry of absence stretching across the white expanse. It is not what is visible that draws attention, but what consistently disappears. At the edges of those empty squares and soft grey blurs lies a different kind of frontier, one, not of exploration, but of omission. The maps say there is nothing there. The instruments disagree. And somewhere under that veil of light and cold, the ice waits, holding its shape over something that refuses to be seen. The subglacial heat. Beneath the endless white plain of Antarctica, where temperatures on the surface can drop below -80 degrees Celsius, heat still moves. It rises from the bedrock like a buried pulse, faint but steady, detectable only by machines sensitive enough to read the planet's hidden signatures. For decades, scientists believed that the continent's cold was absolute. Then came the first thermal surveys, revealing that beneath the ice, warmth flows through cracks and channels, forming patterns that should not exist in a place so far from the sun. In the late 1980 seconds, a team from the British Antarctic Survey began recording subtle geothermal fluxes under the West Antarctic ice sheet. The data showed heat rising from specific points, not evenly distributed, but localized, as if from vents or hidden sources. Most of the readings clustered around Marie Byrd Land, a region long suspected to sit above a rift system. In 2017, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory confirmed these findings with data from the Icebridge mission. The satellite's radar revealed a network of subglacial heat plumes spreading beneath the ice. One region near Mount Sidley emitted more energy than any other, with temperatures estimated at 180 milliwatts per square meter, roughly equal to volcanic zones in Iceland. Officially, these were classified as geothermal anomalies caused by a mantle hotspot. Yet, the pattern was unusual. The plumes did not align with known volcanic chains, nor did they match the underlying tectonic structure. Instead, the heat seemed to flow along narrow corridors beneath the ice, forming lines hundreds of kilometers long, bending as though guided by unseen forces. Scientists described them as thermal rivers. The discovery suggested that parts of the Antarctic bedrock were not frozen at all, but actively melting the ice from below. In East Antarctica, where the ice sheet is thickest, similar anomalies were recorded beneath the Gamburtsev Mountains. A 2009 seismic survey revealed zones of high heat flux deep within the crust. The readings were inconsistent with normal geological processes. There were no volcanoes nearby, no rift valleys, no magma chambers. The warmth seemed to come from nowhere. Later studies by Russian scientists at Vostok Station detected electromagnetic fluctuations in the same area, low-frequency pulses repeating every few hours, synchronized with slight tremors measured by seismographs. These rhythms were described as subglacial oscillations. The source was never identified. One of the strangest discoveries came in 2018, when infrared satellites detected a stationary heat source beneath the ice near 72 degrees south, 76 degrees east. It covered an area roughly 50 kilometers wide and remained stable for several weeks before fading. There were no known geological structures beneath the coordinates. When researchers attempted to retrieve archived data from earlier surveys, the files for that location were missing. A later explanation suggested solar reflection anomalies, yet the signal had originated from below the ice, not above it. Around the same time, a Norwegian research vessel operating near the edge of the Ross ice shelf recorded unusual water temperatures rising from the seabed nearly 2 degrees Celsius higher than expected for the region. Chemical analysis showed elevated levels of methane and trace metallic ions, consistent with hydrothermal venting, but no volcanic activity had been mapped nearby. The vessel's captain noted in his log that the water appeared to shimmer under the light, as if heated from below. Samples collected from that site contained microbe colonies previously unknown to science, living in near-boiling temperatures. Geothermal activity alone cannot explain all of these anomalies. The heat output in some areas far exceeds what should be possible for the known crustal thickness. Certain models now propose that vast pockets of liquid water, trapped for millions of years beneath the ice, may act as insulators, channeling energy through convection. Others point to deeper mysteries, residual energy from cosmic impacts, radioactive decay, or even magnetothermal reactions triggered by changes in Earth's magnetic field. Whatever the cause, the warmth is slowly reshaping the ice from within. Some researchers have raised another question. Could these heat sources indicate artificial structures buried long ago? In 2019, radar scans of the Ellsworth subglacial highlands revealed symmetrical cavities beneath the ice, each roughly 1 kilometer long, with straight edges and uniform depth. The official interpretation called them collapsed ice channels. Yet, the thermal readings around them were abnormally high, concentrated along their perimeters as though heat was being emitted from within the voids themselves. When a proposal was made to drill near one of the sites, environmental restrictions halted the project indefinitely. The pattern of anomalies appears to form a ring beneath West Antarctica, stretching from the Thwaites Glacier to the Ross Sea. Some have speculated that this configuration suggests an underlying dome or circular structure. In 2020, a study from the Alfred Wegener Institute noted gravitational deviations in the same area, consistent with a dense object buried deep below. The authors did not draw conclusions, writing only that further data collection is required. The region remains closed to civilian exploration. To the scientists stationed on the ice, these mysteries manifest in subtler ways. At night, when the generators fall quiet, they sometimes hear distant cracking from beneath the frozen ground deep, rhythmic sounds like the groaning of the earth itself. Seismographs record them as microquakes, repeating in patterns too regular for random movement. Some last for hours. Others seem to migrate slowly, as if something beneath the ice is stirring. If the Antarctic ice were ever to melt completely, these heat plumes would become visible as rivers of stone and steam. For now, they remain hidden, locked beneath kilometers of frozen silence. But their presence is undeniable. The ice is not uniform, it breathes, it shifts, it hides a warmth that has not faded since the ancient past. Whether this heat comes from natural processes or from something older, something still active beneath the crust, remains unanswered. The data is partial, the access restricted, the conclusions left unfinished. All that is known is that Antarctica, long thought to be a land of absolute cold, possesses an unseen heart that burns quietly in the dark. The whispers beneath the ice. When the winds stop and the machines fall silent, the ice begins to speak. It is not a sound that carries through air, but through the frozen earth itself, a low, vibrating hum that instruments record, but human ears can barely sense. Across Antarctica, sensors buried deep beneath the snow have picked up these faint, rhythmic tones for decades. They are known among researchers as the Antarctic songs, though the origin of the name has been forgotten. The signals are slow, deliberate, and strangely consistent, repeating in patterns too regular for coincidence. The first of these whispers was detected in 1962, when a Soviet seismic array at Vostok Station recorded continuous vibrations at a frequency of 1.6 Hz. The readings lasted for nearly 10 hours, long after local tremors had subsided. The phenomenon repeated again a week later, then disappeared entirely. At first, it was dismissed as equipment error, but similar results appeared at other stations thousands of kilometers apart. The American base at Byrd Station noted identical oscillations within the same month, though the two facilities had no communication with one another. In 1999, the U.S. National Science Foundation installed a modern network of broadband seismometers across the continent as part of the PolarNet project. These devices were capable of detecting the faintest movements of the planet. Almost immediately, they began recording strange patterns. Some signals pulsed in intervals of exactly 20 minutes. Others moved across the array as if following an unseen path. The amplitude was too strong to be random background noise, but too weak to be an earthquake. When cross-referenced, the same signal appeared in stations separated by thousands of kilometers, arriving with precise timing. Researchers called them isoquakes, assuming they were caused by shifting glaciers. But isoquakes do not repeat at fixed intervals, nor do they travel in clean, circular waves. In 2006, data from the University of Washington revealed that one such signal, originating near the Ross Ice Shelf, had circled the globe multiple times before fading. It was, in effect, a whisper, echoing through the entire planet. As technology advanced, more instruments began to hear what the ice was saying. Radar interferometers detected pulses moving under the East Antarctic ice sheet, running from Dome C toward the Aurora Basin. The pulses repeated every 4 hours, consistent in shape and strength, as if something was shifting in cycles. The readings persisted for months before ceasing abruptly. When the equipment was recalibrated, the phenomenon did not return. In the internal report, the event was categorized as a non-glacial periodicity. No cause was listed. The sounds themselves, when translated to audible frequencies, resemble the hum of wind through hollow metal. Some technicians described them as voices, multiple tones layered together, rising and falling with mathematical precision. In 2018, researchers from the University of Chicago converted one of the longest signals into a sound file lasting 8 minutes. The result was unsettling, a chorus of low drones that wavered like a chant. When played back in isolation, faint overtones appeared every 40 seconds, aligned with known resonance frequencies of the Antarctic crust. It was not a mechanical fault. The sound had structure. A small number of independent analysts began comparing these frequencies to magnetospheric events fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field caused by solar wind. While some correlations were found, others occurred during quiet geomagnetic conditions ruling out space weather as the source. A 2020 paper in Geophysical Research Letters proposed that the tones might come from meltwater resonating within subglacial tunnels, but the strength and duration of the signals exceeded what water flow could sustain. In one case, a single tone continued for over 30 hours, without measurable decay. At Vostok Station, where the ice is nearly 4 kilometers thick, older analog equipment still records faint rumblings every few weeks. The Russian team refers to them simply as the murmurs. During winter months, when temperatures drop to their lowest, these murmurs become more frequent. Some speculate that the ice is contracting, producing frictional noise. Others believe it is something deeper, a release of trapped gases, or the collapse of caverns far below. Whatever the cause, the sounds follow no pattern of weather or temperature. They arrive without warning and vanish without trace. There are also reports of electromagnetic interference accompanying these seismic whispers. In 2011, instruments at the South Pole Station detected spikes in the extremely low-frequency ELF range each time the ground sensors registered a tone. The phenomena occurred simultaneously, suggesting a link between mechanical vibration and electrical discharge. Engineers described the coupling as unexplained cross-frequency resonance. After several months of recordings, the equipment was replaced, and the event was not discussed publicly again. The whispers have inspired countless theories, everything from subglacial volcanic movement to hidden geothermal machinery, yet none fully explain their consistency. Some of the frequencies repeat across decades, unchanged by shifting ice or seismic drift. If these were purely natural events, they should evolve over time. Instead, they persist, as if produced by a source both ancient and stable. Even stranger, several signals appear to originate from beneath Lake Vostok itself, the sealed lake buried under 4 kilometers of ice. Acoustic models suggest a reflective structure within the lake, something solid, capable of producing echoes at fixed intervals. Attempts to study the anomaly more closely have been blocked by environmental restrictions. The official reason is the prevention of contamination. But to those who have listened to the recordings, the impression is clear. Something beneath the ice moves or remembers how to move. In recent years, data sharing between stations has become more controlled. Many seismic records are now encrypted and accessible only to participating research agencies. Some of the earlier datasets, from the 1,990 seconds, have vanished from public archives. When asked, officials attribute the loss to data migration errors. Still, fragments survive waveforms that continue to hum in archived hard drives, the quiet voice of a continent speaking in frequencies we cannot yet understand. At night, the scientists stationed on the ice describe a peculiar sensation. The ground seems to vibrate softly beneath their feet, even when the air is still. It is as if the land itself is breathing slowly, deeply, in rhythms older than life. Beneath the weight of 4 kilometers of frozen silence, Antarctica hums. Whether the sound comes from the shifting of the planet or from something beneath it that never froze, remains an unanswered question, an ongoing conversation between ice and time. The lost expeditions, long before the Antarctic Treaty, before satellites mapped the ice and governments sealed its borders, the continent drew men southward with promises of discovery. Many arrived, some returned, others simply disappeared. In the early maps of Antarctica, those drawn between the 19th and mid-20th centuries, there are blank regions annotated with a single phrase, "not yet observed." The phrase remains fitting. The earliest losses came during the heroic age of exploration. In 1912, Robert Falcon Scott and his team perished only 11 miles from their supply depot after reaching the South Pole. Their journals, found months later, spoke not of panic but of stillness. "Great God, this is an awful place," Scott wrote, "and terrible enough for us to have laboured to it without the reward of priority." His final entry, penned in a frozen hand, ended with a line that would become symbolic of all who vanished after him. "For God's sake, look after our people." But as exploration advanced from sledges to aircraft, a new kind of disappearance began, quiet, unrecorded, and sometimes unexplained. In 1939, the German Antarctic expedition led by Captain Alfred Richer set sail aboard the Schwabenland with 2 Dornier flying boats. The official mission was to scout potential whaling grounds. Yet, the aircraft were equipped with cameras capable of high-altitude surveying and carried experimental radio equipment. They photographed more than 600,000 square kilometers of Queen Maud Land, marking the terrain with aluminum spears bearing the German flag. Several of the photographic plates were never published. When the ship returned to Hamburg in April 1939, a portion of its cargo was classified by the Reich Ministry of Aviation. To this day, those missing rolls of film have not been located. During the 1,940 seconds and 1,950 seconds, multiple nations sent reconnaissance flights over the continent. Some of those flights vanished without distress calls. In 1947, a U.S. Navy PBM Mariner, assigned to Operation High Jump, exploded in mid-air over the Bellingshausen Sea. The official report listed a fuel leak as the cause. Yet radio transmissions before the crash mentioned strange haze conditions and light reflections at altitude. No full wreckage was ever recovered, only fragments scattered across the ice. A decade later, in 1958, a Soviet transport aircraft designated Li-2 tons disappeared while flying supplies between Mirny and Vostok stations. The weather that day was clear. Search crews found no debris, no signal, no survivors. The only trace came from a faint radio fragment recorded by another station. 3 short beeps, then silence. Declassified documents later confirmed the Soviet government classified the loss as environmentally sensitive. Even in recent decades, the pattern has not entirely ended. In November 1976, a British field team from Halley Station failed to check in after setting out to collect magnetic readings near Coatsland. Their tracked vehicle was found intact 2 weeks later, its instruments still running, engine off, doors open. The surrounding snow was undisturbed. The last line in the team's field notebook read, "Signal strong tonight, too regular to be aurora." No further explanation followed. More modern incidents appear as footnotes in logistical reports. A Chilean Air Force C-130 Hercules disappeared over the Drake Passage in 2019 en route to the Antarctic Peninsula. The official search found small pieces of wreckage days later, but black box data was never released. Witnesses from a nearby research vessel described seeing a flash low on the horizon, though no explosion was detected on radar. The report concluded, lost due to icing. Crew. Throughout the second half of the 20th century, amateur expeditions attempted to reach forbidden coordinates or rumoured warm zones beyond official routes. Many of these journeys were stopped by weather or mechanical failure. A few simply vanished from record. In 1965, an Argentinian geologist named Julio de la Cruz assembled a 5-man team to explore the Shackleton Range. They departed from Esperanza Base in early December. A month later, radio contact ceased. When a search was mounted, their camp was found abandoned. The tents were upright, supplies untouched, and the ice marked with long, parallel grooves extending toward the horizon as though something heavy had moved beneath the snow. Their disappearance was never resolved. By the late 1970 seconds, governments had begun tightening restrictions on independent travel to the Antarctic interior. The stated reasons were safety and environmental protection. Unofficially, the missing expeditions had raised quiet concern. In 1982, a United Nations environmental report mentioned unverified losses of small research parties in polar regions. No further details were provided. Among the more persistent legends is that of the Magnet Point expedition. In 1989, two Canadian scientists working under private sponsorship allegedly travelled toward an unmarked heat anomaly recorded by satellite near 72 degrees south. Their last transmission mentioned oscillating compass readings. When recovery teams reached their position months later, they found only a half-buried transceiver still transmitting a carrier tone. The signal frequency was identical to that of the subglacial pulses recorded at Vostok Station the same year. Skeptics argue that Antarctica's extreme conditions are explanation enough. The continent erases its own history. Winds of over 200 kilometers per hour sweep the surface clean within hours, covering all traces of camps or wreckage. Ice drift can carry debris hundreds of kilometers away, and magnetic storms often disable navigation. Yet some disappearances occurred under calm skies, near bases, within sight of radio towers. In such cases, silence feels heavier. Declassified naval reports from the 1,960 seconds show repeated entries marked "lost without trace, probable ice collapse." But field photographs from the same operations depict smooth terrain, not crevassed ice. In several instances, recovery crews reported compass deviation and radio blackout near the lost sites, phenomena identical to those described decades earlier during Operation High Jump. What became of those who vanished is uncertain. The ice keeps no graves. Some believe that many of the missing simply lie beneath collapsed shelves, preserved forever in the frozen layers. Others suggest that the continent's deep fissures and subglacial tunnels extend farther than maps indicate, natural traps that can swallow entire machines without leaving evidence. And then there are those who whisper of restricted zones, where recovery is neither attempted nor allowed. The names of the lost are scattered through old logbooks, memorialized in small brass plaques at research stations. Birdsmen, Soviet pilots, surveyors, divers, meteorologists, each was drawn to the same emptiness that still lures researchers today. They vanished in a place where even sound moves slowly, where radio waves bend, and where the ground itself seems to listen. In the archives of several nations, brief references remain: weather clear, signal strong, communication ended. Each marks the moment the world narrowed to white. In those gaps between coordinates, the Antarctic takes back its own. The metallic anomalies. In the silent depths beneath Antarctica's ice, machines built to map glaciers have often found something else: reflections that do not behave like stone, and magnetic readings that do not belong to natural formation. These are the metallic anomalies, faint echoes that suggest something solid and deliberate lies beneath the frozen crust. Their discovery began as accident, the byproduct of science probing too deep into the continent's hidden layers. The first serious indication came in 1958, during seismic soundings conducted by the International Geophysical Year Project. A British team working near the South Pole recorded echoes that returned faster than predicted, as though the seismic waves had struck a dense material buried under several kilometers of ice. The anomaly appeared as a sharp spike on the graph, distinct from the soft curves of rock or sediment. When the data was compared to neighboring sites, the reflections repeated in the same area. At the time, the readings were attributed to subglacial basalt intrusions, though basalt does not produce such clean, metallic resonance. The notes in the field log contained a single additional remark: unusual reflectivity check instrument calibration. In the decades that followed, better instruments only deepened the mystery. In 1973, an American survey flight over Princess Elizabeth Land recorded sudden magnetometer fluctuations intense enough to trigger alarms aboard the aircraft. The readings lasted for 47 seconds and were localized to a small area roughly 400 meters across. Subsequent passes over the same coordinates failed to reproduce the event. The U.S. Geological Survey later confirmed that no magnetic anomalies of that strength had ever been observed elsewhere on the continent. In 2001, radar imaging from NASA's ICESat program detected beneath the Wilkes Land Basin a circular mass more than 250 kilometers wide and unusually dense. Analysts called it the Wilkes Land anomaly. Its gravitational field suggested an immense object buried under 1,600 meters of ice. Some proposed that it was an impact crater left by an asteroid roughly the size of Mount Everest. Others, including physicist Ralph von Frese, pointed out that the shape was not consistent with known craters. It lacked the expected raised rim and melt distribution. Instead, the readings showed a concentrated metallic core at the center. Von Frese called it a mass concentration, perhaps something engineered. Around the same period, Russian and European joint expeditions began recording smaller, local anomalies using ground-penetrating radar. At Lake Vostok, several linear reflections appeared beneath the southern shoreline. Unlike natural fractures, these lines ran perfectly parallel, each several hundred meters long. The spacing between them, exactly 62 meters, remained constant along their length. The discovery was documented in a 2003 technical paper, but was removed from later editions of the conference proceedings. Unofficially, one of the researchers described the reflections as resembling rows of metallic plates or compartments. Unquote. Other studies hinted at similar patterns. In 2012, a German geophysical survey identified clusters of high conductivity material near the Mertz Glacier. The materials appeared to concentrate in rectangular formations, each about 2 kilometers wide. The report concluded that their shape and uniformity are inconsistent with volcanic or sedimentary origin. When journalists requested access to the raw data, the agency declined, citing national research agreements under the Antarctic Treaty. Thermal mapping has also played a role in revealing these anomalies. Satellites monitoring the continent's surface temperatures have repeatedly identified localized hotspots that align with magnetic peaks. One of the strongest sits near 74 degrees south, 100 degrees east, precisely above the Wilkes Land anomaly. The heat output is equivalent to several small volcanoes, yet no eruption or surface disturbance has ever been observed. Some geologists suggest that the warmth is caused by radioactive decay within metallic deposits, possibly iron-nickel ore from ancient impacts. Others find the explanation incomplete, noting that the heat distribution forms a symmetrical ring. The shapes beneath the ice are often geometric. Some radar cross-sections show perfect angles 90 degrees, 45 degrees patterns that rarely occur in nature. A French research team in 2018 published an abstract describing orthogonal radar returns near Dome C, consistent with artificial boundaries. The abstract was withdrawn within weeks. In private correspondence, later released by an independent researcher, one of the authors admitted that the pattern resembled a buried structure with straight corridors or walls. Quote, even seismic studies designed to measure the movement of glaciers have hinted at solid foundations far below. Vibrations in certain areas travel faster than through ice or rock, implying the presence of dense material. In a 2016 report from the British Antarctic Survey, data from East Antarctica showed several zones of abnormal velocity. These zones lined up with known magnetic anomalies. The findings were noted briefly, without comment, and never followed up. What these anomalies represent remains open to interpretation. Some scientists believe they are remnants of meteorites or iron-rich asteroid fragments buried long ago. Others propose that they are ancient mountain roots sheared by tectonic activity. But a small number of researchers have pointed out something peculiar. The regularity of the shapes and the precision of the alignments suggest intention rather than accident. One example often cited is the so-called Dome C grid, a cluster of rectangular returns covering nearly 10 square kilometers. When mapped, the features form a near-perfect lattice, each section aligned to true north within less than 1 degree of error. Attempts to reach these coordinates have faced repeated obstacles. In 2014, a joint US-Australian drilling project scheduled to bore near one of the magnetic peaks was abruptly cancelled. The reason given was logistical difficulty due to unstable ice. Funding was not reinstated. Since then, no authorized expedition has approached the Wilkes Land anomaly. Remote sensing continues, but much of the resulting data is withheld under classified agreements tied to the treaty's security provisions. Those who have studied the anomalies for years describe a sense of unease. The reflections behave differently with each new scan, as if responding to the probing frequencies themselves. In some sequences, the radar echoes change phase, producing harmonic patterns ripples that seem almost alive. Engineers call this resonant feedback, the signature of energy interacting with a conductive surface. Whether these metallic presences are geological, technological, or something between, no one can say. They lie silent under kilometers of ice, beyond the reach of drills and cameras, perfectly preserved by the cold. The data suggests weight, density, and precision, but not age. For now, they remain numbers on a screen, a riddle translated through static and reflection. What waits beneath the ice does not rust, decay, or shift with the glaciers. It endures, hidden by frost and time, repeating its quiet metallic echo whenever the instruments pass overhead. It is the continent's deepest secret, visible only in vibrations and shadows, yet solid enough to remind the world that not all of Antarctica is made of ice. The Black Archives. Somewhere beneath the surface of bureaucracy, Antarctica exists twice, once on the maps that anyone can see, and again in the archives that no one can. Behind every scientific announcement and declassified report lies a darker ledger, written in fragments, stamped restricted, eyes only, or withheld pending review. The continent is one of the most studied places on Earth, yet perhaps the least understood, not because evidence is lacking, but because much of it remains sealed. These are the Black Archives, the cold vaults of paper and magnetic tape that hold what the public was never meant to read. The first official records to vanish were those from Operation High Jump. Of the hundreds of aerial photographs taken between December 1946 and February 1947, less than a quarter have ever been released. Many negatives were listed as damaged by frost, though photographers from the expedition later stated that all film had been properly stored. In the US National Archives, entire file series related to High Jump's magnetic and seismic readings are missing, replaced by index cards bearing the words "Transferred to Naval Intelligence 1948. Attempts to locate these materials under the Freedom of Information Act have yielded nothing. The Navy maintains that the records were destroyed in a routine purge. Other documents took longer to disappear. In the early 1960 seconds, when the Antarctic Treaty entered full enforcement, participating nations began quietly classifying older research logs. The Soviet Union sealed data from its 1,958 seismic surveys at Vostok Station records that included deep resonance anomalies beneath the lake. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, Western researchers expected the files to surface. They never did. A 1,993 inventory of the Russian Geophysical Institute lists the Vostok folders as temporarily withdrawn. They have not been seen since. Even civilian research faces barriers. During the 1,970 seconds and 1,980 seconds, as new radar and magnetometer technologies matured, private institutions requested access to Antarctic data for comparison studies. Many of those requests were quietly denied or heavily redacted. A 1,984 memorandum between the British Antarctic Survey and the U.S. Geological Survey, mentions coordination with defense agencies regarding sensitive magnetic anomalies. No further explanation is provided. More recent archives exhibit the same selective silence. In 2011, the European Space Agency's Cryosat mission recorded unusually dense subglacial returns near Princess Elizabeth Land. The resulting analysis was classified under the European Commission's Security Restricted Tier, a designation rarely applied to scientific data. When the press inquired, officials replied that the dataset contained potentially misleading interpretations. Some of the missing material isn't simply hidden, it has been erased. In 2017, a polar researcher at a Scandinavian university discovered that multiple Antarctic data repositories had quietly replaced their download archives with placeholder files reading "content unavailable due to data migration." The missing records included radar scans of the Wilkes Land anomaly, satellite composites of the Ross Ice Shelf, and long-term seismic data from Dome C. Within weeks, the university's internal servers were updated to remove all cached copies. Occasionally, a fragment escapes. In 2002, a series of leaked microfiche reels surfaced briefly on an online auction site, labeled USARP 1963-67 Restricted Polar Operations. The reels contained faded images of aerial charts, handwritten coordinates, and notes referencing objects beneath the ice, non-geological in character. The seller vanished after the listing was removed. Digital archivists who managed to download low-resolution copies found nothing legible enough to verify authenticity, yet several coordinates matched known zones of magnetic interference. In 2015, a retired technician from a defense subcontractor gave an interview to a small Scandinavian magazine. He claimed to have worked on telemetry systems for radar satellites used in polar mapping during the 1,980 seconds. According to his account, certain data packets flagged by onboard algorithms were automatically diverted to non-public storage channels. When asked what qualified as non-public, he replied simply, "reflective geometry." The publication retracted the article within days, citing legal pressure. The secrecy extends to biological research as well. When microbial samples were retrieved from the borehole above Lake Vostok in 2013, reports initially announced the discovery of unknown DNA sequences. Within months, the story shifted. The samples were reclassified as contaminated. Yet, the raw genomic data was never uploaded to GenBank, the international database for genetic sequences. Instead, a note appeared stating that data access is restricted in compliance with international policy. The scientists involved have since declined interviews. The Antarctic Treaty provides a legal framework for this silence. Article 12 allows member states to withhold data for reasons of national security. Although the clause was originally meant for logistical safety, it has become a quiet justification for indefinite secrecy. The result is a continent surrounded by barriers of information. Inside government archives, the files that remain accessible are filled with absences. Sentences end abruptly, graphs lose their axes, entire pages are blank except for classification stamps. In some folders, photographs have been physically cut out, leaving clean rectangular voids. Notes from archivists sometimes accompany these omissions, short remarks like "missing at source" or "copy not received." The effect is cumulative, a continent made of holes. Independent researchers who have tried to reconstruct the missing record describe the process as chasing shadows. Patterns emerge across decades, repeated coordinates, recurring phrases, magnetic distortion, unusual echo, thermal irregularity. Each appears, disappears, and reappears under new project names. It is as though the story of Antarctica has been rewritten continuously, generation after generation, each version erasing the last. In one of the few unredacted interviews from the 1970 seconds, Admiral George Dufek, who oversaw several U.S. Antarctic missions, was asked what still remained undiscovered beneath the ice. His response was simple: more than people would believe. The interviewer pressed further, asking if he meant geological features. Dufek paused, then said, "Features, yes. Let's leave it at that. The transcript ends there. The black archives are not kept in a single place. They exist in fragments across the world, in basement vaults of military facilities, in microfilm drawers at geological institutes, in forgotten hard drives labeled only with project acronyms. Each fragment offers a glimpse into what lies beneath the continent's silence: structures that echo radar pulses, heat that moves without magma, and coordinates that no satellite may show. The ice may keep its secrets through time, but it is the archives that keep them by design. They guard not only what was found, but what was never meant to be asked." The sentinel beneath. For more than a century, Antarctica has been described as barren a place, without memory, without voice. Yet, beneath its ice, instruments continue to record patterns that repeat with unsettling precision. In the early years, these signals were dismissed as noise-mechanical faults, magnetic storms, or echoes from geological layers. But as the decades passed and technology improved, the patterns did not fade. They strengthened, converging toward a single, silent region deep beneath the polar plateau. It began with the discovery of subglacial reflections, sharp, metallic echoes, where no rock should be. In 1979, a British survey plane flying near Dome recorded an electromagnetic pulse from the ground below. The burst lasted only milliseconds, but it carried a structured frequency and organized tone. Engineers filtered it through spectrographic analysis and found a repeating interval of 7.8 Hz, the same base frequency as the Earth's own Schumann resonance. The reading was filed as equipment anomaly. 10 years later, another pulse identical in frequency was recorded 1,500 kilometers away near the Gamburtsev Mountains. 2 points on the far side of the continent, singing in unison, far below the ice. In 2004, the European Space Agency's Cryosat detected faint electrical fields under the East Antarctic ice sheet currents, moving horizontally through layers of rock and frozen sediment. The phenomenon resembled induction, as if something metallic was interacting with the planet's natural magnetism. The readings fluctuated rhythmically, like a heartbeat, aligning with the same 7.8 Hz pulse once recorded by aircraft decades earlier. This time, the data was archived, labeled Polar Resonance Event. No follow-up was published. A year later, a seismic array at Dome C detected a deep vibration too regular to be an earthquake, too slow to be machinery. The pulse repeated every 12 hours, a cycle matching the Earth's rotation relative to the Sunday. When researchers triangulated the source, the coordinates pointed toward a trench 2 kilometers below the base of the Gamburtsev Range, where radar had already shown reflective shapes of geometric clarity. The tremor was faint but persistent, like a low hum beneath the ice, vibrating through the crust itself. For years, no one mentioned it. Then, in 2018, during a joint French-Italian research project, a drilling probe, lowered into an ice borehole, recorded an unexplainable signal, an electromagnetic spike rising sharply before flattening into a sustained tone. The signal was not random. It was modulated, carrying harmonics that mirrored human speech patterns, though slower and deeper. When accelerated 200 times and converted to audible sound, the playback revealed a rhythmic oscillation resembling syllables. The team who recorded it submitted a paper titled Anomalous Elf Resonance Beneath Dome C. The paper was quietly withdrawn before publication. In the private correspondence that followed, one of the engineers wrote, "The source is stationary active, and continuous. The amplitude fluctuates as though adjusting to observation. His message was intercepted by institutional sensors and never officially acknowledged. But fragments of the data leaked online years later. Independent analysts verified that the waveforms were real. The hum beneath Antarctica had a pattern too precise to dismiss. A possible explanation circulated briefly within academic circles: piezoelectric discharge. Under immense pressure, crystalline minerals could release electrical pulses. Yet this theory could not explain the periodic rhythm, the harmonic frequencies, or the way the signals seemed to synchronize across multiple stations thousands of kilometers apart. The pattern resembled coordination, different points responding to a shared source. When the US Geological Survey attempted to cross-reference data from seismographs worldwide, they found matching low-frequency oscillations occurring simultaneously at opposite ends of the continent. In essence, the pulses were echoing through the planet's own crust, returning stronger each cycle. One internal memo from 2019 summarized it in a single line: Antarctica is transmitting. Those who have spent their lives studying the continent's secrets now speak of something they can measure but not name. It does not behave like a natural phenomenon, nor does it resemble artificial interference. It is steady, patient, and vast, an energy signature with no visible source. Satellite scans show no machinery, no movement, no heat. Yet the instruments tremble as if in the presence of something alive. At Concordia Station, researchers have reported peculiar side effects. During weeks when the resonance peaks, communications lag unpredictably. Clocks drift by seconds. Hard drives record errors without physical cause. In 2021, one technician wrote in his logbook that metallic objects in the lab tools, pens, even spoons, would occasionally vibrate softly, emitting a faint hum matching the recorded frequency. The phenomenon ceased when the base switched to backup power, then resumed when main systems reconnected to the regional grid. The entry was never included in the final report. Across the years, the data has been handled the same way: classified, redacted, renamed. The anomaly has no official title, but among those who still whisper about it, it is known by one word: the Sentinel. Not an object, perhaps not even a structure, but a presence. Something embedded deep within the crust, neither mechanical nor biological, but enduring. The oldest myths describe the poles as the gates of the world, the points where heaven and earth meet. In Norse legend, they were the anchor points of Yggdrasil, the cosmic tree connecting all realms. Some of the earliest explorers of the modern era, Amundsen, Shackleton, Mawson wrote of a sensation impossible to describe, a feeling that the land itself was aware, as if the ice were listening. Modern instruments, replacing those instincts with data, now hear the same quiet reply. The Sentinel does not speak in words. It speaks in resonance, in measured rhythm, across ice that has never thawed. Some believe it to be the echo of the planet itself, a natural frequency amplified by the magnetic pole. Others think it is something older, the remnant of a civilization buried when the world was young. Whatever it is, it watches through stillness. If the ice were ever to melt, what would rise from below might not be ruins, nor metal, nor life, but a signal, waiting to complete its circuit. Until then, the hum continues, deep and patient, pulsing through the frozen heart of the earth. Beneath the frozen stillness, the questions remain. The signals continue. The ice endures, guarding whatever sleeps below it, as it has for millions of years. Perhaps it is only nature, patient and vast. Or perhaps the guardians of the ice are not made of stone or law, but something deeper, something that watches quietly as we measure and guess. The truth, for now, stays buried beneath the coldest silence on earth. If you've listened this far, let your curiosity rest with the frost. To journey deeper into the hidden chapters of our planet, its lost maps, ancient builders, and unseen frontiers, join us again in the next story. Subscribe, leave a like in the comments, and drift with us into the quiet mysteries that history forgot.